Again, my name is Shamar Walker. I'm the owner of SWHR Consulting, and today we're really going to talk about creating a positive and engaging team culture. So on the agenda for today, we're going to focus on what is a positive, engaging team culture. What are some of the important aspects of having a positive, engaging team culture? What are some of the elements? Why do we have to define the positions, responsibilities, and expectations to individuals that are joining our team or people that are already on our team? The importance of defining that and why we should do that. Why we should be hiring the appropriate people, why people matter in terms of being a cultural fit for your organization. The process of onboarding someone, how does that impact their ideals of what your organization stands for? Communicating, what's the best way to communicate to not only new people that join your team, but people that are already within your organization, and being able to track their performance against your expectations. And lastly, we'll talk a little bit about how to handle closure and transition gracefully out of your organization if that time comes.
Excellent.
So what is company culture? When you think about company culture, it really is the personality of the company, right? It really is how you define the environment to which someone works. This includes a lot of different elements from, your work environment, your company mission, your values, ethics, and expectation and goals. When you bring somebody into your organization, it's really important for them to understand your mission, your vision, the direction that your company is trying to go, so that you can essentially have their buy-in from the start. And some of the things that we're going to talk about today is, again, the onboarding piece of it allows them to get a good understanding of where your company's at right now, what you truly believe in terms of your values and your mission and vision within your organization. When we think about, a company culture, you kind of want to think about it like a human cell, right? As you know, the human cell is, has a bunch of different organisms within it that work together to make sure that our body functions appropriately. When you think about a company culture, it's the same thing, right? There's a bunch of different people within your organization, different backgrounds, different experience that contributes to the success of your business. So really honing in on, the individuals and how they contribute to your organization really helps them, your company culture. There's two ways of creating a company culture. One is active process. The other is passive process. So what active process truly means is really you as the leader of your organization or the owner of your business is taking that initiative to create what that culture is going to look like. If you don't do that, then you leave it up to passive, right? And that's really leaving your culture to chance, which is, again, maybe having employees determine what your culture is going to be like. And that if you think about bringing someone onto your team and you didn't, hire appropriately the first time and that person turns out to be a bad apple in the bunch, now that person is then creating a bunch of other different bad apples because you left your culture to chance. And now you have a culture that is negative, right? So it's important for you to take the steps in the beginning to allow for people to understand your vision, your mission, what the expectations of your company are, what your current culture in your organization, how you would like to keep it. So taking more of an active approach into your company culture is better than, of course, a passive approach. So what is a positive, engaging team culture? When you think about a positive, engaging team culture, you're really thinking about the environment that you're bringing people within, right? You want it to be a positive, high productivity, really adaptable type of atmosphere. I mean, your organization is going to change, and we understand that, but you want to be able to make sure when there is change that's going to happen within your organization, that it's introduced to your employees in a positive way. And the biggest way to be able to do that is really get their buy-in, right? So when you introduce a change or a new process within your organization, a lot of employees, are resistant when you just come to them and say, okay, this is the change, and I just want you to do it without getting their buy-in. So a better way to approach it is really introducing that to the organization by maybe sending a survey or, getting everyone together and, presenting the information or the change to them and really being able to get their input and their feedback, because ultimately that's going to impact them. So if you're not allowing them to have a voice in the decisions that you're making for the organization, a lot of times, that changes the perspective of your employees. So you want them to feel like, you want them to feel passionate about their job. You want them to be committed to your organization, and you want them to work hard for your company. So getting their buy-in, getting their feedback with the changes that you're trying to do in a positive manner allows for them to continue on the path of making sure that your company grows and contributes to a successful organization. Any questions so far?
It looks, Shamara, like there's a time investment in creating that positive team culture. The things you've mentioned require some attention. And I'm wondering, often businesses are so involved in just going from, maybe they're in crisis management, going from crisis to crisis, or just keeping things moving in their business, that they don't even have time to put into the team culture. How much time investment are we looking at? And what would you do with that time investment?
Well, I honestly feel like, when it comes to company culture, it's not something that has a time frame built into it, right? It's really timeless because it's ever changing depending on the direction of your company, depending on the types of people that you bring into your organization. So it's one of those things that you have to constantly work on in order to keep that same vision, mission, and values up front within your culture. So it's something that I would say is very timeless. But it does take the work of the leadership to really, really make sure that everyone has a clear understanding of where you're trying to go with your company.
Well, then let's look at it a different way. So I'm running a business that has 10 to 20 employees, let's say. And I want to create a positive, engaging team culture. Are there goals that I can set? Is there a way to measure the team culture? How do I proceed?
Yeah. So in our next couple slides, we'll talk a little bit about how to proceed with that. Okay.
Excellent.
No worries. So, before we dive into kind of the steps that you will take in order to create this positive, engaging culture, there's a few things that, you want to consider. So in a recent survey of, we talked to about 1,400 CEOs over the United States. About 90% of them felt that the culture was really the most important aspect of their business. They felt that, understanding the culture, introducing the culture in the beginning stages of their business allowed for not only the buy-in of their employees, but it improved the value that the company brings to not only their customers, but what that employee is going to, how the company is going to bring value to the organization as well. It also helped to not only give the employee the ability to be more productive, it stems creativity and really overall growth for your organization as well. So where do you begin, right? So how do you start your culture? What are some of the things that you need to think about, right? There's 5 things listed here, but I'm just going to go over it in general, right? Building a positive culture doesn't mean that you're going to start from scratch, right? Because you as the owner already know what is it that you're trying to do and what are you trying to, in terms of how you're trying to spread your message, right? So it's not necessarily something that you're going to start from scratch because you already know what your vision, mission, and values are. It's now introducing that to the employees, helping them to be on the same page as you and not expect them to do a complete 360 in terms of being able to adapt, right? They have to be able, you have to give them the time to adapt to that culture, because not everyone is going to get it right away. Right? Talked a little bit about asking the employees about their feedback. So understanding what their likes are, what their dislikes are within the current culture that you would like to change or enhance. We want to be able to, as a leader, take those suggestions to heart and make those changes. Ultimately, it's your goal as a leader to create an atmosphere that is positive, that someone will want to come and work at every day, because we spend most of our time at a job, with other people there. And if you can't get along with the individuals that are within your organization, or you don't understand the direction of the company or the values of the company, as an employee, you're not going to stay. So it's the job of the owner or leadership to really create that atmosphere that allows for people to stay and want to continue to grow within the organization. So these are some of the steps that you will take to build that culture to allow for growth and positivity in the future. So going back to your question, David, these are the ways, 4 ways that you can start in terms of creating that culture. Are you guys still there?
We're here.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, my internet.
That's all right.
So step 1, is creating those goals. So going back to what you said, David, creating goals. No organization can create a corporate culture without goals, right? Employees need to be able to, again, have their own, the company has their own goals, and each individuals within your organization should create their own goals and objectives that they want to work towards. And then come together as a company and bringing not only the company goals, but the employee goals together, and then really looking at those 2 things and seeing how they can align together in order to achieve that goal, okay? The other thing is encourage positivity. A lot of times it's easy to be negative, right, in situations that come up within the organization. So as a leader, you want to continuously be positive, right? Building a positive culture by encouraging positivity within the workplace. Some examples of that is really, taking the time to express gratitude, smile, remain optimistic during difficult situations. These are ways that will help to continue to engage your employees and create that positivity. Because if you're a negative leader, then you're going to have negative employees, and then you're going to have a negative culture. So it really does stem from the leadership in order to create a culture that is positive. 3, enhance on the employees' well-being, right? This is one of the biggest things that I think that a lot of companies have a challenge with, is because we have to get the work done, right? Everybody understands there's work to be done and it needs to get done, but you have to have that balance, right? There needs to be work-life balance within your organization, because if you work someone to death, they're not going to be able to contribute to your organization in the direction that you're trying to go, because they're too tired, they can't bring new ideas, they're mentally and physically not available to really put their best foot forward. So creating that balance within your organization is helpful in stemming a positive work environment or positive culture. And then create an environment of trust. Employees can feel when you don't trust them, right? And so it's very different between, when you're telling somebody to do something versus allowing them to have the ability to show you what they can do, right? So it's really stemming that ability for them to be self-sufficient and not micromanaged. I always try to stress to, the leaders within organization to let people feel like they have the ability to make decisions. When they feel like they don't have the ability to make those decisions, you're going to get less interaction, because now they're waiting for you to tell them what to do. And we want people to feel, very independent within your organization. We want them to feel that you trust their abilities to do the job. And so pulling away from the micromanagement and really focusing on making sure that they feel like they're capable of doing the job is really important in encouraging a positive environment. Do you have any questions so far?
Definitely. Yes, I'm looking at these and they're awesome goals. Thank you for putting these on the radar for us, just to identify these 4 areas. They're very powerful. The one thing that I'm noticing on each of these areas is that it can be very subjective. Positivity, employee wellness, environment of trust. These are very subjective things. Is there a way that, and maybe this is your next slides, Shamara, and I'm anticipating again, I don't know, but is there a way to objectify some of these subjective things? Like, is there maybe a survey you can have your employees take to help you know, is this a positive environment, for example? Because most employers will say, no, I don't micromanage, and this is a very positive environment. We have clear goals, and I'm really concerned about employee wellness. However, if you talk to the employees, they may have an entirely different picture of how things are. And so how can an employer get some good, positive feedback to know that what's in their mind may not be what's in the mind of their employees, which is really critical?
Yeah. One of the things that we typically do, just, from our experience, when we do go and work with a lot of these companies, is do an audit. So the first thing that, we do is go in and not only do a compliance audit, but a cultural assessment audit as well. And that allows us to ask the questions to the employees directly about the culture. How do they feel, about the atmosphere? Do they think that they have that work-life balance? Do you feel that, do they think that they have the ability to make decisions without being micromanaged? So one of the ways that we do it is, definitely doing an audit and being able to pull that information from the employees and then present that information back to the leadership. Another way is exactly like you said, is, taking the time to send out surveys on the culture and asking the questions directly to the employees. That's a great way for you to be able to capture the information and then being able to represent it back to them and say, okay, so why do you feel this way? What are some of the things that we can change based on this survey in order to make, you feel better about the culture and the organization? So there's, those are just two different approach. A lot of times companies will reach out to companies like ourselves to be able to come in and help with that assessment. Sometimes, with the surveys, employees are not always that honest.
Sure.
Make them and, may start to, again, challenge them at that point. So us coming in, I think, as a third party allows them to be a little bit more free in, being able to speak, because they're not giving the information directly to leadership. So it's very much of a catch-22 depending on the approach.
It seems like if these 4 elements are not in place, that maybe a do-it-yourself turnaround may not be as effective. I don't know, because it seems like what you're saying, like you do an audit, you coach the companies, and it seems like a company may need to look at, have guidance along the way, because you're training both the employer and the employees. And I noticed a chat from Mark Mars. He says a simple survey we've seen clients use is the employee net promoter score.
Yeah,
Um,
that's one. There's
yeah.
also like the Marshberry. There's quite a few. There's quite a few out there that that you can use. Marshberry is a really good popular one as well, that you can use as well to capture that information. But again, just depending on kind of where the company is at this time. When you have a culture that is really way past saving, bringing someone like ourselves in can help with that. If they're just seeing that there's a little bit of trend in a negative trend in certain aspects in certain departments, then a company-wide survey can definitely help to address it once we kind of have an idea of where they're at.
Okay. And Stan is saying he has a great case study example to share at the end. So good. We're going to have some good feedback on this. It just seems like if the organization is not well and the culture is not well, that it's kind of like you need to go to the doctor maybe and not just try to heal yourself. But on the other hand, it seems like it would be important to know where you stand and then to reassess a year later, and
Correct.
or at regular intervals to see how things are developing, so you can see movement and you can see the results.
So it's really it's really having that pulse, right? I would recommend if your employees, if your company's not way past that point of saving, maybe having quarterly surveys sent out to the team will help in kind of retrieving that information. So surveys are really, I think, the biggest way that you can get that feedback. But of course, it just takes the company to make that decision, and again, how much they truly care about their the success of their company as well as the individuals within it.
Well, here's the situation. I would think that those companies that have leadership that is tuned in and has these 4 elements on the radar,
right,
and they're concerned about it, I would imagine those companies are more likely to have a positive culture, or at least moving toward a positive culture naturally. But it's the companies that don't even have these things on the radar. They don't know what's wrong. And maybe they haven't put any attention into it. They don't even know that a positive culture is a thing. And so, if that's the case, how can a company, what are some of the signs that your culture is not positive? What are some of the things you might be experiencing as a company that you don't know what's wrong? It's like you're experiencing a disease or a problem. You're experiencing the symptoms, but you don't know what the disease is. What are some of the signs of a bad culture?
So we'll definitely cover some of that in our later slides. But some of the things that I can think about is one, if you have toxic people within your organization, that information gets to leadership very quickly. So a lot of gossip happening. If there's, if you see that there's policies and procedures that are not being upheld or being enforced by, for example, HR within the organization, that can already tell you that there's something wrong with your organization as well, in terms of it, going in a negative direction. There's just quite a turnover. One of the biggest things is turnover. That's how you can tell when your organization is not positive. People are leaving, right? So those are some of the big things that I can think about right now. But we'll talk a little bit more on the later slides as it pertains to that. But yes,
I was in a company that I brought in a marketing branding specialist, and he was there for in his first 6 months. He looked around the table and he said, There were like 15 employees at that company. He said, I think I'm one of the most senior people here after 6 months. So there was that much turnover. And so,
right. But yeah, I mean, that is definitely one of the biggest indicators that, that your culture is not very positive or sustainable, because you've seen a lot of people leaving. So, just to kind of go into the benefits, right? What are some of the benefits of a healthy, positive culture? One,
okay, let me say one thing real quick. We got a couple chat notes from people.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to read those so we have those on the radar. From Debbie Kluska. Do employees fill out the survey anonymously? That is hers. And then from Michelle McGee, to everyone, saying there are different kinds of surveys. The anonymous one is definitely one of them. So
yes. So thank you for that. Yes, anonymously I think is the best approach, because we don't want to target anyone. And that typically happens when they're not anonymous. Leadership tends to target the individual that may have, voiced their opinion. And that's definitely not the approach that a leader should take. They should embrace any feedback, because if one person is feeling that way, it might be that quite a few other people might be feeling that way. So anonymously, I think, is the best approach, so that there's no targeting and retaliation happening. So again, some of the benefits of a healthy and positive culture. Financial benefits, of course, is one of them, meaning, you going back to the whole turnover piece of it, it's really more expensive to have to hire individuals than to retain them. So every time you hire someone new, not only that you have to pay them what they want, but the cost of training that new individual, the cost of just getting them into your organization is much higher than retaining. Because when you retain an employee, they, of course they have a standard salary, but you can increase the salary minimally, right? Versus having to outright offer someone $70,000 when you might have someone in your organization that's at 60, and you can just increase them to, a couple percentage, right, to 62 or 63. So it's much more cheaper to keep them than to lose them. That makes sense.
I've heard that it costs an organization something like $16,000 every time there's an employee turnover. Yeah. Roughly
about that amount. Yeah.
That's huge.
Because again, you have to think about the technology aspect of it that you're going to, that whatever they're going to be working on, systems that they're going to use, the training aspect of it, the salary amount, all of those things are factors that contribute to the cost. So it's definitely a financial benefit. And then recruiting, right? The way that you recruit someone within your organization definitely allows for them to get a first taste of how you approach your employees and the culture. So if someone has a bad experience, say with your recruiter on the line, like, you were supposed to reach back out to them and follow up and get them interviewed and scheduled and all that type of stuff, and that does not happen, that already, gives the impression that you don't care, right? So creating a positive, the benefits of having a healthy culture starts in the recruiting aspect of your business. Better employee engagement is another piece. People are happy in a positive workplace. They work harder, they're more focused, they're more engaged. When employees are unhappy, they're more stressed. Your culture is more exposed to more of a negative working environment. They tend to be a lot more disengaged, and it ultimately affects your productivity, which affects your bottom line. And so bottom line is, again, one of the biggest things that a company look at, which sometimes is the only thing they look at, so they don't focus on the culture. But again, the culture impacts your bottom line, because if you don't have people to do the job, how are you going to increase in revenue, or how are you going to grow your company? So it's important to have that engagement and peace and have in place, and have an environment that is positive in order for everyone to still be engaged, still want to be on, still believe in your vision, your mission, and the values that you have within your organization. Loyalty. You have a positive environment, you have more loyal employees. They're more committed to you. This reduces the turnover within your organization. And again, it's less expensive because you don't have to spend the time on training new individuals or the technology, new salaries, things like that. So you have a greater loyalty within the organization for the individuals that are currently working for you. And then fewer absences. I wouldn't want to work in an environment that's negative, so I'm probably going to call out every day or every other day because I don't want to go into work. And again, because we spend so much more, these employees spend all their time at work, it's like their second home. So no one wants to go home every day and be yelled at or, told them that they're less than or those types of things. So it definitely increases, again, the ability for them to be more loyal to your organization, fewer absences. People are not going to be calling out because they're happy to come to work every day and they're excited about the direction that your company is going and they want to be a part of that. Okay.
Sounds valuable.
Huh?
Sounds like there's some really valuable benefits to having a positive culture.
Yeah. I mean, again, all of us on this call are in our, own our own businesses. So, when we talk about these things as a business owner, you need to be, thinking about that when you're bringing people into your organization. Because again, it stems from you. If you're constantly negative, if you're constantly telling people they're not good at what they do, or you're micromanaging them, they're not going to stay. They're not going to be excited to be a part of your team. So it really does stem from leadership down.
I would think the same thing is true if it's a much smaller business, what we call a solopreneur, and that solopreneur has contract employees, that those contract workers are, you want to create a culture there too. A positive culture is not just for paid employees, but a positive culture is for business associates. It's for
it's overall, right? It doesn't matter if they're employees or not employees, or again, employees versus 1099 or whatever. It's about you as the business owner and what are you trying to do, what direction that you're trying to go, and how do you get the buy-in of whoever is going to be a part of that, right? It really just comes down to what are you trying to say?
Any collaboration, and you could even take these, extend it to like your family at home. What kind of culture do you have in your own family? It's like you can't. It would seem to me that you can't be one way on the job and another whole person at home, but you need to have integrity of character and approach anytime you're relating with people.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Definitely.
Comment.
Yeah, of course. And again, it really starts from you, and it's important that you understand, what type of culture that you're trying to create. And it goes back to, again, not leaving it to the passive approach, taking more of an active approach in the beginning when you're forming your business or when you introduce people to your organization, because they're relying on you to create that positive, engaging culture for them. They're not relying on themselves to do that. Okay? They can help with that, but they're not expecting to come in and create that culture for you.
Yes.
So what can affect your culture negatively, and how to avoid negative impact? So we talked a little bit about that before, where if you bring one bad apple, that one bad apple can spread throughout your organization, and now you have a toxic environment. So toxic employees is one of the biggest things that you want to avoid bringing in. So that's why I say it really does start from the recruiting aspect of bringing people into your organization, really, really defining those roles. And we'll talk about this here shortly, but really defining the roles, the expectations, those things in the beginning, so that you are hiring the right fit for your organization that can contribute to the success of your current culture. So, to combat toxic work environment is to increase, to combat toxic work environment is to definitely increase the engagement piece of it. So again, allowing people to have a voice with change helps to combat that, because if they are constantly being told what to do and they don't have the ability to speak on some of the ideas, then they start talking amongst each other. Then it becomes a negative thing, that the thing, the idea that you introduced now became something negative because they're talking amongst each other and they're looking at it in a negative way. So now you have a negative, culture just from just taking that approach. And then focus on profit. Like focusing on profit, again, creates that negative culture, because it shows that you just want workhorses and don't really care about the well-being of the individuals within your organization. So, yes, I understand bottom line is important because that's how you're going to, continue to pay them. But we don't want that to be the focus to where employees can clearly see that that's your only, your only goal. Okay. So really focusing on them, not profit, is in terms of how you want to be portrayed is what you need to be doing in order to combat some of this negative culture. Poor communication. I think this is one of the biggest factors that contribute to a negative, one of the biggest, is poor communication. And again, that stems from not allowing them to, not communicating what those values, your visions, your goals, some of the changes in the processes, and not communicating that effectively with individuals in your organization really stems poor communication, and then ultimately impacts your organization. So communication is one of the biggest things that I would say is important to combat this, because everybody needs to know what you're trying to do and where you're trying to go. Being resistant to change. A lot of times leadership do struggle with this one because they're so comfortable in what they've been doing. And a lot of times when they bring people into the organization that have new ideas that can bring create the ability to progress, they look at that as negative. I know from my experience, in the working corporate America, I was one of those individuals that did have a lot of great ideas, right? And did want to be able to bring those to the table. But my management was like, oh, well, those are great ideas, but I want to be the one to introduce it. Or we're not going to be able to do that right now because of this, this, and this. And so it's combating those resistance by allowing the person to even just have a voice, a voice of what those ideas are, have them, present how it's going to increase whatever, the positivity of the culture or the direction of the company by giving them the opportunity to speak. So being resistant to change doesn't help to increase positive culture, but also just creates more of a negative. Any questions here?
Those sound very common sense, actually. You just take a little time to be aware of them.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is common sense when it comes to culture. And like you said, it's not something that is tangible in a sense, because it's not concrete, right? It's not a product, right? So it really is about speaking the things that you want to see to the individuals within your organization, because you don't necessarily have a product that you're selling. Your product is you, the product is your mission, the product is your vision, you know, your values, and getting the buy-in in that, because you don't have anything that's tangible. Okay?
Yes. Very good.
Okay. So how does negative culture affect your retention within the organization? And I'm supposed to stop right here. So I'm trying to see if Victor is ready. Victor, are you ready to dive in? I'm not sure if he's on the call. No, he's having a little bit of technical difficulties, but.
Yeah, he was having trouble connecting with his audio.
Okay. How does negative culture affect your retention, right? So that was one of the things that we talked about a little bit earlier in terms of retaining. Is more cost effective than having to start from scratch. So some of the things that affect retention is morale, right? Negative outcomes and attitudes. The way that each individual talk to each other within the organization, not having the ability to have, again, that voice of reasoning within your organization contributes to your retention, because, again, they don't feel valued. So what is the point of being part of your organization? Some of the other things is, you know, inconsistencies with paychecks. So if your company can't pay someone, or they don't maybe offer that work-life balance, all of those things can affect the ability to retain individuals. So, you know, paying attention to those things is some of the ways that you can move away from retention. Retention issues.
Okay. Maybe at this time we could just open it up for questions, but first of all, is there like one more important thing that you would like to share? What's the most important thing that you have not shared that you feel we all need to know? And then we open it for questions.
Yeah, no, I think we're good for right now.
Okay. So this is how we can do the questions is unmute yourself. Make sure that you look where your name is, and where it says mute, just unmute yourself and feel free to ask a question or make a comment.
Hey, David, this is Stan.
Yes, Stan.
Might be a good time for that little case study that I was talking about.
Yeah.
Okay.
As Shamara, so Shamara, first of all, excellent presentation. Great.
Thank you.
As you were going through these, I'm looking at it and I'm saying, wow, you know, it's interesting. I did this with my martial arts business in much more from a common sense and kind of knowing what kind of culture I wanted.
Right.
Not necessarily this methodical, totally planned out process, right? 3 major points that I remember as I'm looking at what you're talking about there, and me going into buying the martial arts school. I bought it in 2002. And I remember that I had 3 things that I wanted to make sure that happened. And it was to have a family environment, friendly staff, and the cleanest school in town. And here's some of the things that I did to create that family environment, because that's the kind of a school that I came from. We had lots of events, like for instance, when it was rank time, when it was time for promoting students to new ranks, we did it as a potluck event, so that we just brought families together, and we took the first half of it, or the first part of that event, and we did all of our rank promotions, and then the kids and the families and everybody got to hang out together and get to know each other on a one-to-one basis. And then we just did all kinds of other events like skating parties, summer cookouts, holiday parties, and we had something really cool called ATA's Got Talent. So it was a talent show night that my students came and they could show a talent, but they couldn't do martial arts. So they had to do some kind of a talent other than martial arts, right? But those kinds of events really helped us bring together that family environment. I'm going to turn on my camera just because I'm getting animated over here, and I don't want to myself, right? So the other thing that I had the friendliest staff, because, you know, people saw the movie Karate Kid, and they saw how Cobra Kai studio was, you know, these tough guys, and it was just, you know, there was no friendliness and nobody smiled, and many people were terrified to walk into a martial arts school in the first place. So part of that culture for us was, we're going to have a friendly team, a friendly staff, so that people felt comfortable coming into the school. And the third part was cleanest school in town, because you could see a lot of these schools that had trophies in the windows, and these trophies were all covered with dust, and, you know, things are unorganized and just all over the place. And I'll tell you, the biggest compliment that we got from that whole concept was, well, there were two things. One was, I had a student join, and always when they joined, I would always ask them, how did you hear about us? Well, we just happened to be in a shopping center that had lots of foot traffic. And I asked this little girl named Jordan. Well, I asked her mom, how did you guys hear about us? You know, and she said, look, my husband walked by on Sunday with Jordan, because they went to the ice cream store. He walked by with Jordan. He looked in your window, and he came back home, and he told me this is the place to sign her up. And I said, really? Why? What was it that made him do that? It was a Sunday. We were closed. He said, your place was clean and organized. And so kind of the moral of that story is exactly what you said, with regard to how does that translate into revenue? How does that translate into more business?
Right.
I bought the school in 2002 with 40 students and about $8,000 a month in revenue. And it grew in a 3 to 4 year period of time to 250 members and about $40,000 in revenue per month. And so having that culture, building that culture intentionally, the way that you want it to be,
right.
And it really can make a gigantic difference.
Marvelous.
And that's exactly why I said it really does start from the owner, leadership, right? In how they want to portray their culture, and what are some of the things that they're going to do to get not only their employees buy-in, but the customers buy-in, right? Because that translates all the way through to your customers based on how the employees see what you're trying to do with your business. So
absolutely.
And Mark made a comment on chat just a moment ago saying that agreeing that customers can really affect the culture of your business.
Right.
As he was listening to Stan. Yeah. Okay. Other questions for Shamara? We got the expert here. Okay. And if somebody's trying to talk, remember to unmute yourself first. People do that. I see lips moving when we've got video, and somebody's going into quite a conversation.
No worries. So let's talk a little bit about the elements of a healthy company culture. We talked a bit about all of these things before, but I just want to go into a little bit more detail. So as we talked about before, communication, right? The way that executives communicate with the employees and the way the employees talk to each other is a crucial aspect of your culture, right? Again, it comes from the top down, and you don't want to leave anything for chance, because once employees start to take on their own ideas of what your culture is, it can then become something that they create versus what you created. Incentives, rewards, and recognition. So rewards behaviors that you want to see. Celebrate behaviors that support and reinforce your culture that promotes not only your values, but also promotes employees who believe in your culture. Get that buy-in. Tell stories. People want to know where you came from, why your business has been so successful, what got you to this point. When you have a story to tell, you become more, more relatable, right? And so you want to be able to share those stories of your successes, some of your failures and, how those failures help to contribute to the culture that you have right now, and what some of those successes that help to contribute to your culture right now. So having something to stem from with stories allow for that buy-in as well. In practices, of course, values are little important unless they're enshrined in a company's practices. So if an organization professes people are our greatest asset, it should always be ready to invest in their people. So this is pretty much talking about, if you tell somebody something when they start with your organization, please keep your word. Again, no one wants to come in blindsided. I mean, if you say, hey, you're going to get 4 weeks of vacation, they expect to get 4 weeks of vacation. So keeping your word is very important to creating that healthy type of atmosphere. Because if you keep going back and forth on the things that you're telling them, then again, you're going to lose them along the way.